Hello, and welcome to what I hope will be the first in a series on small and simple looms, or small or simple looms, I suppose. And today I'd kind of like to talk about this 3-pin arrangement pin loom that was originally called a WeaveIt loom and developed in around about the 1930s. There's a number of them that existed in different sizes, although the most common was approximately 4 inches. So smaller ones, larger ones, they're pretty inexpensive even if you buy one new, and obviously because it is just a frame with some pins and a particular arrangement, they are something you could make yourself if you have a little bit of, what do you call it? Crafting abilities, DIY skills. Because they're quite old, or at least the WeaveIt looms are quite old. There is a modern version of this that costs a little bit more, made by Shack Spindle Company. That's called a Zoom loom, and I think those run $40-ish US, something like that. They're a bit pricey, but they have a wider, more comfortable base. But there are vintage ones out there that you can find in thrift stores and on eBay and whatnot that don't cost too much. When I bought this one, they were averaging about $8. I think they're a bit more now. There are PDF copies of the vintage instructions floating around. I will try and link anything I believe will be useful in the description. So all of these old little books are floating around as PDFs, instructions for putting things together with your little loom. And up to and including garments and things like that. Oop. Sideways. So sweaters and whatnot with, I suppose I should show you what you make on them. You make these little woven squares at the end. This one happens to be made out of some hand spun that I had, which creates kind of an interesting texture. It's a little, when it gets washed, it'll kind of even out a bit more. But I think for the demonstration we're going to use some store-bought acrylic, and I'm going to make a bit of noise, I think. I think I have some examples of the acrylic. Let's see here. I do. Some squares from this very inexpensive, I think it's a Red Heart, yeah, so Red Heart Unforgettable, in a color that I thought was very pretty in the store and then never quite figured out what to do with it, but there it is. So you get quite a few little squares, and they're obviously much more consistent looking than my slightly chaotic hand spun, which is a little intentionally chaotic. So there you have it. Yeah, you can make these small looms for very little money depending on what you have around. They're quite simple to use, and once you get the hang of it, can be pretty therapeutic, relaxing, not a super demanding task. If you have, the slightly terrifying weaving needle here should, if you find one of these, or if you buy a new one, should come with this large weaving needle. However, they also do sell these. You'll need a weaving needle, or you can get away with using a tapestry needle, but it is easier to use the long weaving needle And they're only, I think they're $1 or less. They're not very expensive. In theory, most big box craft stores should have them. But you know, it's a slightly quirky thing, so depending on where you live, you might have to order it online. But they're not especially expensive. A little pair of scissors. I happen to have had slightly fancy looking embroidery scissors, but obviously anything that cuts will work. Anything else do I need to tell you? You have yarn, some kind of cutting the yarn tool, weaving needle, your frame, however that works. Okay? I don't think there's anything else to be said about it. So let's go ahead and show you how it works. These old commercial looms and the Zoom loom from Shacked, and I think at least some, if not all, of the ones you might find on Etsy. This is not as obvious on the plastic. Let me get the wooden one. Have numbers. That's a 1, that's a 3 with an arrow going around, and there is a 2 there. It does also exist on this plastic, but I don't think this camera is capable of showing you. But in this bottom corner, there is a number 1. So that is where we are going to start weaving. And basically how this works is that you lay down a number 3 foundation layers, and then you actively weave through the last one. So my very first thread, actually we can fix the light a little bit. Let me get a better light. There we go. So we are going to lay our very first piece of yarn right along this outer edge from the number 1 to the number 3 on this one. And then we loop around the top 2, these 2 pins. Hopefully that's visible. And you go down between these 2. So there's 2 and 2 in this particular corner. And I'm going to kind of flip that over just so I don't have to worry about securing this tail later. And then around these next 2, and I'm going to go up, and I'm going between the first and the second pin at the top. And around those 2, and between the first and second pin on the bottom set of 3, and then looping it around between the first and second on the next set, and down around those 2 between the first and second, up and around, and down and up, and we just continue the whole way across. If you are working with a yarn that is not very stretchy, if it is a cotton instead of an acrylic or a wool, you might want to make sure that these foundation layers are very, maybe not very, but certainly loose. I'm making it slightly tight because I am trying to focus on telling you what I'm doing. So this is tighter than it needs to be, certainly, and tighter than you would like. It's okay if it's wiggly looking when you're laying this down. It'll all clear out in the end. So now in this top right corner, I have a set of 4. And I'm going to go through the first and the second pin at the top, if you can see that. And then I'm going around the next 2, and that's going to put me between the 3rd and the 4th. So there's 1 pin sticking out, and I'm going to bring my yarn right along this edge and between these 2 at the bottom. So then I have my first layer finished. And what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to turn my whole loom to the side, or however you're most comfortable with doing this. You know, as long as you get the job done. There's never a wrong way to do something. However you're comfortable and capable of accomplishing the task is the correct way for you to do it. So making sure that if we have a tight yarn like a cotton, that these are probably looser than mine are here, but that they have, you know, a little bit of give. If it's acrylic or wool, you're probably fine. In my bottom corner that I just went out of, I have 2 pins, and I'm going to go around those 2 pins and go up to the top, and I'm between the first and the second one. And then we're just going to go across this direction the same way we did our first layer. So between the first and second pin of this set of 3, and around that pair at the end, and between the first and second at the top, and down, and we're going to repeat the whole way across. And let me see if I can do things a little bit looser this time around so you can see what it looks like. Obviously, because I'm not a practiced hand at doing videos. I'm a little tense. Anytime you're doing something you haven't done a lot, you kind of tend to be a little tense, but that's okay. But let's see if I can get it so that it looks, yeah, so you can see how this is quite tight and these are quite loose. So if you find you're having a difficult time on the final step when we get to it, the weaving, you might want to go back and redo it with a looser weave, which is no problem. Sometimes you have to try things a couple times. Now that I'm at the end of this pass, so we have one going that way and one going this way, we have a corner with just 2, and this would be my corner that has a 3 in it. And I'm going to turn it so that the top has my yarn going to my ball this time. And we're going to change a little bit, but not a lot. So there's 2 pins in this corner instead of the 4 that we've seen before. I'm going to just go between those 2 pins. And what you might notice is that I'm going between 2 threads that we've already made. And we are between the first and second on a set of 4 at the bottom. And then I'm going to get some more yarn first. And I'm going to go around 2 and up, and this time we're going between the big space, between the pairs of 3, and we're going around the first 2, and down and through the big space at the bottom. So if it helps you to look where you have been and that you're going in between where you have been, or that on the 3rd round you change and you do the 2 in front instead of the 2 in the back, however it helps you to remember and keep track of your things, whatever works for you. Let's recenter a little bit. And I'm just going to go up and down that whole pathway. Should be easy. Oh, we have an interesting lump in the yarn there, some texture. That's fine. Especially on these little plain woven squares, a little bit of inconsistency in your yarn can make it interesting. If you like that, some people want very perfect things, and that's fine. Especially when you're new to something, if it looks off, you might want to, well, it might worry you that it doesn't look perfect as you're learning, which I understand, that's fair. So now I've gone and I'm in the bottom corner, and I'm by where the 2 was, but here we've finished laying down our foundation row. And what you do at this point with all looms of this type and any pin loom that you're doing a continuous weave on, that is, there's one thread for the whole weave, you kind of do a trick where you measure the remaining yarn that you're going to need by going around the outside of the pins. So for these ones, you need 4.5 rotations around the outside of the loom, right? So I'm going to go around the outside of the loom, so that's 1, and then we continue for 4.5. I'm going to do 5 just because I like a little extra tail at the end. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's 5 back to the beginning. And if you lost count, you can always kind of pull at this edge. You can look at this side, and especially here you can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 threads going around. So I have 5 total. So now I'm going to take my scissors and give it a cut. And I'm going to have a quite long tail at this point. Unwind that. And there is my square, and here is my tail. Oops. That's okay. Get that back. So I'm going to find the end of my long tail, and I'm going to take, oops, if I can grab it, my large weaving needle, or if you have a darning needle, that's fine. And I like to fold over my yarn across the needle in order to thread it. You can see the eye there. I'm going to pinch and pull it off, and then I get this little nub, and I can just push that through the eye, and I have a threaded needle, because yarn is quite fluffy. So if you try and just push your yarn through the end of the needle, you're going to have a hard time. Not saying you can't do it, but you're going to have a hard time. If you like using a needle threader, absolutely go and grab a needle threader, but fold it over, give it a pinch to hold on to it, and then you have a smooth nub to thread. Okay. I'm going to get that to a comfortable spot for me, and this is maybe one of the trickier parts, and it's not that tricky, trust me. So in the bottom corner, you see this there's a little loop right there. If my camera, come now. There's a loop where it's crossed over, and I'm going to go right into that loop with my needle, and I'm going to go over the yarn that is going to my tail. So this is my loose yarn, and there's a little loop right there. So into the loop, over the tail, and then I'm going to go under the next one, and over and under and over and under. Oops. All the way across. Let me get that gripping better. Just, let's see if that's in camera. All the way across. Now you'll notice that maybe these loops are kind of walking up your pins. If that makes you worried, or you don't like it or whatever, you can always get a regular rubber band and just kind of put it across the top of your pins, and that'll keep your loops from walking off your little loom. So I'm going to go all the way across, up and down, and this little one is almost the same color as the loom, but there we go. So we're underneath, and I can double check to make sure that those are all alternating correctly the way I want them to, and it looks correct. So I'm going to just pull my whole long tail through. And that is my first woven row. And you'll notice that this is kind of like a little bit of a smile or a frown. Frown that way, smile this way. This is just the tension pushing through. But also, that means that that's the space I need to go in next, because that's the next one. So in the next little loop, and you can see I'm going to go into that loop and under, whoop, and over and under and over and under and over and under, all the way across. And you're going to be the opposite, over or under, of whatever the yarn is next to your needle. So if you're not sure if you're going over or under the right one, you can check. So I know that I am on the right track because everything is alternating for me. So I'm going to just go ahead and pull that through. And you can see I got a little bit of a crosshatch going. It looks woven. That's the goal, excitement. And we're going to achieve a plain weave. We're just going to keep doing that the whole way across. And there's going to be a little bit of a kind of checker pattern for mine because my yarn changes colors. Has a color change in it, so you can see them pretty well. If you want to do that more intentionally, instead of just whenever your yarn decides to change it, you can absolutely switch colors. You can switch colors for every pass as many times as you want, however you are most comfortable. Like if I wanted every layer to be a different color in this, my 3 foundation layers and then my woven layer, I could do that if I wanted to. Just go back and forth. This can be a really nice, your brain is not up for more difficult tasks, but you need to keep your hands busy activity. Or you just need to calm down. It's not a bad one. Because you don't really have to do your planning until you have your large stack of squares at the end. I mean, you can plan beforehand, but you don't actually have to do anything with them until you have your stack of squares. Now this is quite repetitive, and I don't know that I have much to tell you about the over-under. It's pretty straightforward. When you do finish your squares, the traditionally recommended way of joining them is with a whip stitch, which I can probably show you. It is the stitch where you go around the edge of your fabric. If you happen to be a crocheter, you can also, oops, caught my scissors in that one. You can also join these squares with either a crochet slip stitch or a single crochet because the edges, let me get one of my finished squares. The edges have these nice little scalloped bits, and you can use those to put your crochet hook through or to sew with a darning needle the squares together. Crochet slip stitch or a single crochet edge makes a nice kind of ridge effect. So if you like that, that's an option for you. Obviously, if you are a hand spinner and you make your own yarn, or you're learning to make your own yarn and it's not quite as consistent as you would like, these plain weave squares are a good way to use up some of your more chaotic hand-woven yarns, because the texture makes the squares look, I like how they look. They look nice as a little variation in texture. This yellow, I kind of think, in the woven squares looks a bit like checks. I don't have a huge amount of it, so I think, excuse me, I'm off the tape a bit. I think it's going to end up as a cowl or a maybe a scarf. We'll figure it out. As somebody who does weave when I feel up to it on a full-size floor loom, I find this is a great option when I do not have the physical capability of dealing with my floor loom, and obviously a massive piece of furniture, piece of equipment. The floor loom is not exactly portable. So if you're going and visiting people, or you're on a trip and you need something to be able to carry along, this is going to be a better option. Now, at this point, I'm seeing my weaving going a little bit out, and that could be a little annoying later, so I might kind of push it down, or you can use anything from a kitchen fork to a nice pick comb or something to kind of push them down. You can even just grab with your fingers and pull it down. Or on occasion, I have just taken the needle itself and just kind of pushed it, because sometimes you end up with this woven space is going up. So I can kind of pull it down a little bit so it's not pushing that way. It has a it wants to go places that are less tensioned, lower, I'm sure there's a physics term that's escaping me at this point in time. Less pressure. It's going from a high stress part of the weaving to a lower stress part of the weaving. As you see, my hand is kind of gripping a little tight and a little awkwardly. So if you have some hand pain or difficulty gripping things, you might want to look into either the Zoom Loom style that has a much wider base, or if there is an Etsy creator or something that has a wider base version of this pin loom. Or maybe if you know a handy person, or you yourself happen to be handy enough to make a wider base version of this, that might be something you consider if you're in team hand issues, which I am, but this one doesn't really bother me in particular. So you can kind of tell if you're getting pushed around, if when you're done at the end of your pass, your needle wants to go into a space between the pins that is already occupied by another thread. I think that might be about to occur for me here. Also, you can see that this is getting much tighter, because certainly my first foundation layer was very tight. So you can see my needle wants to go into the space that's occupied already between these two pins. It's a little, it wants to go there, and there's already a yarn there. And I got two options. I can either go through there and then reset my yarn, or I can kind of push physically into the space it's supposed to go in. That one wasn't so tight that I couldn't push in. Sometimes it is too tight and you do have to go in, so I would have been between these and I could just pick it up and put it in the correct spot. And we are getting a little pushed around. Let me see. I'm gonna just take my needle and kind of shove it around. If there's like, so you see how there's a little bit of an openness there, once you're done with whatever you're going to do with your squares, you will wash them. It's fabric, we're going to wash it. And when you wash them, usually, as in almost always, I don't think I've ever seen it not happen, but the tension in the yarn will even out. So this little slight texture difference will even out upon washing. No big deal. The only times that you're going to continue seeing that gap is if you've done something to make it intentional and permanent, or if it is caused by a thickness difference in your yarn, which if you are using commercial yarn isn't going to happen, but certainly, well, most commercial yarn is quite consistent unless it is designed to be otherwise. Now here is the point. A lot of people tend to not make a mistake, but assume that they're finished because you see that this yarn is right up against the wall of needles, and you're out here and it looks like you're done, but you have not finished your full square unless you have gone in this last little loop. Like we did at the beginning, there was a loop. And at the end, we're going to also go into a loop. And this one, you can see, can you see? Inside here, there's a yarn, right? So I want to go over, well, I want to go under that yarn and over the next one, and then I'm going to do the over and under that I have done the whole way across. And this last row, especially if you have been a bit tense and your foundations are quite tight or your yarn is not especially flexible, can be very firm and physically demanding. Now if you're finding that this last row is hard to do, you should not, it shouldn't be physically taxing to do this last row. So, well, I would encourage you to finish your squares however you like. If you find that this is physically difficult, or your needle is bending, or something is quite taxing to you as you come to the end, you might want to practice a looser foundation layer, or change your yarn to something that has more stretch. Different people have different capabilities, of course. This is technically the end of my square, but I do like, you can see where this comes out. There's my yarn. I like going around one more time. It's not necessary, but I kind of just like feeling extra secure and having a little loop. And I can put aside my needle, and here is the fun part, or the terrifying part. There's no finishing, you just push it off the loom. And you have a square, a woven square, to do with as you please. And I can take that and combine it with my existing stack and make whatever I like with it, or just use it as a coaster, I suppose. I hope this is useful, something fun you can do, something relatively inexpensive. If you hunt down one of these vintage ones or decide to purchase or make your own, I hope you enjoy doing this. I think for attaching squares, that might be better as a separate video, but obviously I will link some resources and look it up. Whip stitch or slip stitch crochet or a single crochet will do just fine. They have slightly different effects and different people have different preferences. So I hope you, if this wasn't enough for you to learn to do it on your own, that this will point you towards enough resources that you can figure it out and you can enjoy a little WeaveIt experience, a little portable weave. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Bye-bye.